Amazing Waitress Unveils Hidden Power, Mafia Boss stunned by her incredible response. The bell above the door chimed, a small thud against the dull roar that filled the greasy spoon diner. Emily poured an endless stream of coffee into chipped mugs, the rich aroma filling her senses, offering brief solace from the chaos swirling around her. She loved this diner with its faded red vinyl seats and bustling ambiance, a space that breathed life into her dreams. Yet beneath the thick skin of her resilience lay an undercurrent of anxiety, simmering just below the surface. Today marked the beginning of something she could only pin down as uncertain. When Vincent Russo entered, fear seeped through the cracks in the walls, infecting every patron. His presence loomed large, casting an ominous shadow over the diner. Emily's heart raced as he strode to the counter, an aura of danger enveloping him like smoke. She hesitated, pen hovering above her order notepad. "What can I get for you?" she managed to force out, struggling to maintain her facade of calm amidst the spiraling tension. "Is it true?" he drawled, his voice low and menacing. "You want to be a writer?" The question tore through her like shrapnel, his condescension palpable. She felt the eyes of the diner on her, a mixture of pity and fear. The old nightmares clawed back at her from the recesses of her mind, the ones that whispered she was less than she aspired to be. "Yeah," was all she could say, a simple admission, but it echoed like a gunshot in her heart. "I dream about it." His laugh, harsh and biting, rang out. "Dreaming? Strong arms, weak heart? What's that going to get you, huh?" The laughter of those around her felt like a tightening noose. Emily's breath came in shorter bursts as she grappled with her mounting despair. Could he really strip away her dreams with mere words? "Words are powerful," she said, surprising even herself with the strength in her voice. "They can rebuild what you destroy." The diner fell to a silence so thick she could hear the distant screech of the city outside, a world muffled by her fear yet vibrating with possibility. She met his gaze, a challenge reflected back, wondering if she had crossed an invisible line or stumbled into a minefield of consequences. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Days passed, and with each shift, Vincent returned, and so too did the tumult of emotions that rampaged through her. She should resent him, should want nothing more than to reclaim her dignity. But instead, an unexpected bond grew. As he listened to her speak of the stories and notebooks left behind by her mother, the ache of love mingled with a burgeoning determination. Reflecting on her mother's unfinished dreams ignited a fire inside her, a need to reclaim her narrative. Yet shadows loomed. Vincent's world was unforgiving, layers of loyalty and danger weaving a fabric that suffocated instead of nurtured. Emily wrestled with her fears, torn between the dreams that uplifted her and the risks she sensed lurking in the Mafia underbelly. Suddenly the diner felt like a battleground, a place not just of spilled coffee but of unraveled ambitions, where hope and peril intermingled. Questions clawed at her. Could her voice rise above the choking darkness? Would Vincent soften under her will, or would the weight of his life crush what little light she had ignited? As the stakes intensified, she knew she stood on the brink, a precarious edge where her fear of failure clashed fervently with a desperate hope. The morning sun filtered through the diner window, casting elongated shadows that danced across the floor like fleeting thoughts. Emily busied herself with the tasks at hand, but her mind thrummed with the weight of the past few days. Each time Vincent entered the diner, her pulse quickened, not just from fear but from an undeniable pull that began to echo in her chest, a strange blend of intimidation and inspiration. On this particular day, uncertainty fused with resolve. She had plans of her own, stitched together in the quiet corners of her mind. Each coffee she served, each word exchanged, renewed her commitment to reclaim her narrative, not just for herself, but for the ghost of her mother's unwritten stories. Writing was no longer a distant dream. It was her essential lifeline. Are you going to keep dreaming, or are you going to do something about it? Vincent's voice jolted her from her thoughts, his presence as imposing as ever. She spun around, cup in hand, an impromptu shield against the barrage of his dark intent. There was an intensity in his gaze today, a challenge that ignited her fears and her courage in equal measure. I'm doing something right now, she replied, the firmness in her tone surprising even herself. Every cup I serve is part of it, fuel for my imagination. The moment hung between them, electric and precarious. His expression flickered, the corners of his mouth curling into an amused smirk. Imagination won't pay the bills, he countered, leaning in closer, drawing out the words like a slow tide. But maybe I can offer a little more than dreams. Despite the chill that coursed through her, curiosity crept in. What exactly did he mean? Turning away to collect the clamoring orders, Emily steadied herself. She was terrified yet exhilarated. Was the path she was on leading her into a tangled web? Or was this somehow her avenue to emerge stronger? She felt a rush of empowerment, an awareness that her story was not settled. It was evolving. Days turned into weeks, and each encounter offered not just the pain of confrontation, but lessons learned through the exchanges. Vincent probed her thoughts, coaxing ideas from her as though he were a sculptor chiseling at the marble. Slowly, Emily began to see her thoughts crystallize into something tangible. Tell me what you want to say, Emily, he prompted one afternoon, his voice low, almost intimate amidst the diner chatter. Not what you think the world wants to hear. What do you want to scream from the rooftops? It struck her like a lightning bolt, the clarity in his question. She barely knew how to answer, yet she sensed within her a surge, a stir of ambition yearning to break free. I want to write about the truths we hide, she finally murmured, the pulse of possibility igniting within. You think people want to read that? He challenged, and she felt the old doubts clawing back at her. You think they care about the struggles of some hopeful little waitress? Maybe they do, she shot back, surprising herself again. Or maybe it will just be my truth, but it will be a truth that I will own. That's enough for me. In that moment, the weight of his scrutiny softened. He was visibly impressed. The swirls of their conflict had begun to intertwine. She could feel it shift. Emily had reached a turning point. No longer would she simply dream. There was a burgeoning talent within her, a resolve she had yet to fully embrace. Sometimes it took the threat of darkness to illuminate the flicker of light inside. And as Vincent squared his shoulders, a newfound respect reflected in his eyes. She felt a shift. Was this dangerous man from the shadows, now inadvertently pushing her closer to her own light? The diner might be her battleground, but she was ready to face the war within. With the night darkening outside, Emily knew that the stakes were higher than ever. The boundary between her world and Vincent's was blurring, and it was time for her to take a decisive step. Would she dare to confront the ramifications of her growing resolve, or risk losing herself in the underbelly of ambition and desire? The choice loomed as she stood on the precipice of an awakened self, and she knew. The moment of truth was upon her. The evening shift cast a different ambiance over the diner, the sizzle of grills harmonizing with the murmur of worn-out patrons. But Emily was no longer merely a spectator in this familiar chaos. She felt herself morphing into an active participant, each interaction becoming a piece of her unfolding tapestry. As Vincent settled into his usual booth at the back, shadows accentuated the sharp angles of his face. She delivered his coffee with a practiced nonchalance, the warmth of the cup grounding her amidst the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in her mind. He took it, fingers brushing against hers, and a current ignited between them that sent a jolt through her, reinforcing the precarious balance of attraction and wariness. Writing can be a powerful tool, you know, he said, tilting his head slightly, gauging her reaction. His directness both intrigued and intimidated her. What do you know about writing? She shot back, emboldened by her recent resolve. Part of her still hesitated, but that part kept getting quieter. I know it offers escape, he replied, leaning back, seemingly unfazed. It can manipulate minds just like influence in my world can. The matter-of-factness of his tone didn't escape her. There was a raw authenticity he wielded that both frightened and fascinated her. The conversation felt like a game of chess, with every word a strategic move. You think it's nothing more than manipulation? She challenged, feeling the burn of determination flicker within her. Not nothing, he amended, his voice smooth. But a way to control narratives. People read what they want, and through that, you can shape what they believe. She felt a pit of doubt forming. Was he right? Her ambition began to bleed into her insecurities, awakening ghosts from her past, reminders of why clarity in her voice was crucial. Did the stories she wished to tell, raw and real, merely count as weaponry for a world rife with deception? Whatever I write will be authentic. My truth will cut through that, she countered, her spirit rising with her words. This conversation was less about him and more about her growing conviction, the edges of her fear softening. Then you better make it count, he replied, his eyes narrowing slightly, because authenticity can be dangerous. His warning lingered in the air, and she sensed the unspoken ramifications tied to her ambition. In the recesses of her mind, the specter of her mother arose. Emily remembered how passionately her mother had poured her heart into storytelling, only to be dismissed as irrelevant. Would she, too, face pushback, flack from those who saw her writing as a mere echo of her life as a waitress? Several tables away, chaos erupted, a loud argument spilling over from the bar area. Emily turned her attention instinctively as she listened. Tension coiled in her gut, but instead of retreating, she remained present, challenging herself to confront not only the ruckus but the doubts that shadowed her desires. Sometimes you have to dive into the storm to find the quiet in yourself, Vincent said softly, surprising her with a depth she hadn't associated with him before. Encouraged, she took a deep breath and turned back to him. And you're offering what? A lifeline to the storm or a seat at your table in the chaos? The question was sharper than she'd intended, but her heart filled with a new kind of courage. A flicker of an inscrutable smile passed across his lips. Maybe both. But it's up to you to choose where to cast your anchor. As she gathered plates, her mind raced. Could she redefine her existence, challenge the confines of her world with words that could strip away facades? The internal battle raged, but with each passing moment and each confrontation, an urgency surged. She could feel it racing through her veins, the power poised to unleash if only she dared. As the clock ticked toward closing and strands of conversation melted into the quiet buzz of the diner, she resolved to ask him something she'd long held back. Vincent, what sacrifices do you think we have to make to uncover our real stories? His gaze hardened, and she braced herself for the answer. Was she ready for his truth, regardless of the risk it posed? The weight of the moment crashed over her like an incoming wave, and she sensed an inevitable shift waiting to unravel. The night wouldn't end without a revelation. It was time for Emily to confront the risks of pursuing her narrative, and the answer from Vincent could either propel her forward or lead her down an even darker path. Vincent's silence stretched, the vibrancy of the diner fading as his gaze bore into hers. She could sense the gravity of the moment, a threshold between the safe world of small talk and the perilous territory of vulnerability. She waited, heart pounding, uncertain if she wanted to hear what lay beyond. Finally he spoke. Everything comes with a price, Emily. Your stories, your truth. They'll force you to confront parts of yourself you might not want to see. It's a trade-off between comfort and authenticity. How committed are you to making that trade? The weight of his words settled on her shoulders like an unwelcome burden. Part of her longed for comfort, her stable job, her routine, the quaint familiarity of the diner. But a deeper yearning stirred inside, a desire to carve her own narratives instead of merely existing in someone else's story. Trying to steady her breath, she replied, I know the risk is daunting, but how can I write my truth if I'm scared of what that truth might reveal? Vincent's eyes sparkled with intrigue, and she could feel the challenge transform the air between them. You're asking the right questions. Fear can be paralyzing, but it can also be a catalyst. The question is whether you're willing to embrace that fear and use it as fuel. Emily looked away, momentarily lost in thought. The diner hummed around them, the laughter and clinking dishes creating a musky backdrop of mundane life. It felt suffocating and exhilarating all at once, a paradox reflecting her own life. What did it mean to embrace fear? Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, cautioning against the harsh realities of rejection. Would her stories be worth exposing if they brought only disdain or dismissal? Yet, reverting to the safe, familiar dance felt insufficient. Maybe authenticity does have its price, she murmured, her voice almost lost in the din. But I can't live worried about whether my writing will be regarded as valuable or not. I have to believe it's worth something. Vincent's expression softened, a flicker of respect lighting his gaze. Then perhaps you're closer than you think, Emily. You recognize the burden but still choose to confront it. That's not an easy path, and few take it willingly. With new resolve, Emily gathered herself, a rush of adrenaline propelling her forward. So what do I need to do? Where do I even start? The urgency in her voice surprised even herself. Start by writing without the fear of judgment. What do you want to say? Pour it all out, he encouraged, leaning forward, his intensity contagious. Only when you've stripped away the noise can you find your voice. That's what will set you apart. As the night wore on, their conversation expanded into the nuances of writing, exposing raw emotions, pushing boundaries, exploring the intricacies of real-life experiences. With each discussion point, Emily could feel barriers crumbling, her limitations reshaped by newfound clarity. But beneath the surface of excitement, a question nagged at her. If she chose to share her deepest truth, what would happen to those she loved? Would her narratives potentially harm relationships that had been her crutch? Vincent, she hesitated. What if my writing goes too far? What if I end up ruining relationships instead of forging them? His response came not with bravado but with a sincerity that felt disarming. Sometimes the hardest truths lead to the most profound connections. You may lose people, but you'll also attract those who resonate with your honesty. It's about finding your tribe, the ones who appreciate your authenticity. She nodded, chewed her bottom lip, and pondered how her words could serve as both a sword and a shield, capable of liberating her, yet simultaneously leaving her exposed. With closing time approaching, silence enveloped them for a moment. It was a moment that held potential, brimming with possibilities, and echoing the uncertainty of her next step. She felt a tug at her gut, a blend of excitement and dread. As she wiped down the last table and prepared to close for the night, Emily thought of the power words held. What if her truest self stared back at her through her stories? Was she ready to embrace that person and share her light and shadows alike? Before they parted, she took one last chance to probe deeper. What's one thing you wish you'd known before starting your journey? Vincent's response was immediate and visceral. The greatest risk isn't failing, it's not trying at all. Her heart thudded, realization sinking in. The path ahead was daunting, but within that daunting nature lay the very essence of growth. As she locked the door to the diner, the night drawing in, she knew she stood on the brink of change. The taste of determination lingered like the first sip of coffee, rich and promising. But what would it truly mean for Emily to let her story unfold? The question clawed at her from the shadows of uncertainty as she stepped outside, and she felt the electric charge of the night air echo against her skin. Once again she faced the storm anew. The streetlights flickered, casting a warm glow that mingled with the cool night air as Emily stepped away from the diner, her thoughts now a tempest of potential and trepidation. Freedom whispered its sweet promises, but so too did doubt. As she made her way home, her mind replayed the conversation, each word etched deep into her consciousness. The monotonous sound of her sneakers against the pavement echoed her urgency. The simmering resolve within her began to coalesce into something more tangible. The urge to write, to express, to unravel the truths hiding within. Yet the conversation with Vincent embedded itself like a thorn, reminding her, embracing the truth carried repercussions. Were there aspects of her life too delicate to expose? Upon reaching home, she flicked on the lamp, illuminating the writing corner overflowing with crumpled papers, old journals, and half-finished drafts that bore silent witness to her struggle. The clutter mirrored her conflicted thoughts. This was a sanctuary, a chaotic mirror of her aspirations, yet it felt stifling when weighed against the potential fragility of her truths. Taking a deep breath, she settled into her chair, hands hovering over the keyboard as their earlier discussions replayed in her mind like a movie reel. "Write without the fear of judgment," Vincent's voice echoed. But how was she to embark on that journey? She began typing, each keystroke giving breath to her hesitation. Fear is not the enemy, but a whisper urging you to dig deeper. It felt like a ritual, a first step into the shadows she had long skirted around. With her heart racing, she continued, each stanza revealing bits of herself she had buried. Personal struggles with self-doubt, her observations of life swirling around her, anecdotes that shaped her identity, but had never found a voice. But soon, the encroaching shadows of doubt whispered in her ear. What would her mother say if she revealed the messy truth about their relationship, or if she spoke candidly about the complications of her friendships? As words spilled out, so did the worries of rejection and misunderstanding. Suddenly, the rhythm of her writing halted as Emily caught sight of an empty notebook lying on the edge of her desk, staring back at her as if beckoning. It was untouched, void of expectations, perhaps the perfect vessel to pen her authentic self without restraint. This wasn't merely a tool. It felt like a confidant poised to absorb every nuance of her thoughts. In this quiet moment, a new resolve surged through her. To embrace vulnerability was to invite strength. She would capture the contradictions of her existence, the joy and pain, the love and frustration. Emily leaned back in her chair, contemplating the potential impacts of her words. Her gaze drifted to a framed photograph of friends laughing at summers past. Would exposing her truth taint those moments? Was she ready for possible fallout? Yet as she visualized the potential reactions, she saw threads of connection unraveling through her honesty, weaving towards the people who would understand. Perhaps there existed a tribe waiting with arms open, ready to embrace her reality. Emboldened, she picked up the pen and started handwriting notes in the blank notebook, allowing ideas to flow unchecked. Then, an unexpected phone call interrupted her concentration. It was her childhood friend Sarah, whose laughter pulsed with nostalgia. "Emily, I've missed you. Let's grab coffee soon, maybe catch up on some old times." The invitation hung in the air, tempting yet daunting. How would she navigate the conversation? Open up or keep those weighty truths contained? In that moment, made tentative by uncertainty, Emily weighed her options. "Are you still there?" Sarah's voice broke the silence. "Yeah, just thinking," Emily replied, her pulse racing again. Would she share her budding journey? Would she risk vulnerability and a sideways glance of hope? "I'd love to, really. Let's do that." The conversation flowed seamlessly, yet beneath her friendly tones lay the quakes of impending change. The challenge to bare her soul loomed larger as she felt the sparks of her journey ignite anew. As they said goodbye, Emily turned back to her notebook, the weight of her choices settling heavily on her shoulders. She was at a precipice, staring into the vast unknown of her own potential, ready to confront who she had been and who she yearned to become. But she knew one thing. Before she could embrace all that lay ahead, she had to confront the truths that scared her most. With newfound determination, she prepared to dive deeper into her writing, her heart racing as she uncovered uncharted territories awaiting exploration. The desire to share her voice surged within. But would she find her truth? Or would it find her first? The revelations beckoned just beyond the horizon, waiting to emerge. The morning light filtered through the sheer curtains, casting soft patterns on Emily's writing corner. As she sat at her desk, the world outside buzzed with life. Cars humming along the street, birds chirping a cheerful wake-up song. Yet inside her, a storm brewed. The gravity of her commitment to write honestly weighed heavily on her chest. Life had moved in slow motion since her conversation with Sarah. Their coffee date loomed on the horizon, each passing hour heightening her anxiety. What would she say? Would she unravel her carefully constructed self in front of someone who had once known her inside out? The prospect of peeling back layers of herself was as thrilling as it was terrifying. Churning her thoughts, she let them roll over her like waves. Writing demanded courage, but what was courage for her? Outward resilience against the world? Or a deeper, more vulnerable understanding of her own heart? She had spent years wearing masks and playing roles dictated by expectations. Now she faced the prospect of revealing herself, confronting her fears in the process. Grabbing her notebook, the untouched pages were a stark reminder of her potential, echoing the unvoiced sentiments that floated in her mind like shimmers of light. She wrote with fervor, her pen gliding across the paper. Each thought became a potential paragraph, each doubt a question demanding to be answered. The themes of love, loss, and connection dance in a delicate choreography. But how much of myself am I willing to share? She penned, the ink flowing like a river of catharsis. She began to consider the power of honesty, not just in writing, but in life. It was time to shed the fear that halted her progression, but as she wrote, traces of guilt and anxiety crept in. Would her truth hurt those she cared about? The contemplation of her mother's disapproval loomed larger, a specter reminding her of the abandonment she had felt as a child. It struck a nerve, twisting her heart with memories of strained conversations. Unraveling that truth seemed insurmountable, yet an unsettling sense of rebellion began to take root. Emily felt a surge. Her mother's perspective would no longer dictate her narrative. As night closed in, she held her notebook close, taking a moment to breathe. Would articulating her struggles release her from their suffocating embrace? This was a personal revolution, a reclamation of her story, and she was both terrified and exhilarated. Each word written was not merely a statement but a shout into the void. Determined, she thought back to her friend Sarah. Their reunion drew near. What if she used it as a catalyst, not only to reconnect but to explore the depths of their friendship? Would she dare to tread into the murky territory of her insecurities together? The idea sparked an internal dialogue. She could challenge herself not just to bring forth her truth, but to invite Sarah into that process, an opportunity for connection forged through vulnerability. In that moment, she resolved to approach their coffee date with honesty, not only about her journey but about her feelings towards their friendship. What if she inherited the courage to share not just her struggles, but her aspirations for growth? Wouldn't that be a starting point for both of them? Just then, her phone buzzed, jolting her from her thoughts. It was a message from Sarah confirming the time and place for their meeting. Emily's heart raced with anticipation, excitement mingling with her innate anxiety. As she prepared for their encounter, the question pressed heavily against her. Was she ready to face the rawness of her truth? The struggle whispered dangerously close, but a new certainty charged her. This growing fire within her was undeniable. She wouldn't let fear extinguish it. With the evening air heavy with challenges and opportunities waiting impatiently on the sidelines, she closed her notebook. The next step had been illuminated. It was time to break the silence and step into the light. But as the door of possibility opened, another feeling lingered, gnawing at her resolve. The fear of rejection still held its ground. What if Sarah couldn't handle the truths she dared to unearth? Would she step into the light or retreat into the shadows once more? The unfolding journey awaited, precarious yet promising, unraveling mysteries about herself she had yet to explore. Emily's heartbeat quickened as she entered the cozy cafe where she and Sarah had agreed to meet. The familiar scent of roasted coffee beans filled the air, stirring memories of shared laughter and comfortable silences. With each step, her resolve to be honest wrestled with her instinctive desire to revert to the version of herself that hid behind carefully curated smiles. Finding a small table in the corner, she settled in, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her coffee cup. The cafe bustled around her, a discordant symphony of clinking glasses, laughter, and the hiss of steaming milk. A tight knot of anxiety twisted in her stomach. Could she really lay herself bare to Sarah? Would this be a dialogue where vulnerability was met with understanding? Or would it be met with judgment and disappointment? Time dragged, and the gap between their last meeting felt insurmountable. She took a deep breath, recalling her earlier determination to tackle the core of who she was, not just for her sake, but for the friendship she hoped to rekindle. It was about time she became the protagonist of her own story. How could she expect Sarah to embrace her truth if she weren't willing to offer it first? The bell above the entrance chimed, and Emily's heart leapt. Sarah stepped in, her silhouette framed by the afternoon light, energy radiating from her as she scanned the room. Upon spotting Emily, her face broke into a warm smile that made Emily's heart swell with apprehension and hope alike. The tangled emotions swirled within her. Would they bridge the gap, or would the distance they had created simply deepen? As Sarah approached, Emily stood, unable to hide the quiver in her voice. "Hey, it's so good to see you." "It really is," Sarah replied, her enthusiasm matching Emily's, although she was unaware of the tempest surge within her friend. They settled down, each cradling a steaming mug of coffee, the air thick with unspoken thoughts. Silence lingered momentarily as both women took tentative sips, fidgeting with their cups as sizable hurdles of intimacy and honesty stood between them. Emily felt a bead of sweat trail down her back, the very weight of the impending conversation practically palpable. How would she introduce the topic of her struggles without overloading Sarah, without making it seem trivial or dramatic? "I've missed this," Sarah finally broke in, her voice steady. "Things have been different for all of us, haven't they?" "Yes, they have." Emily leaned forward slightly, the urgency of her message pushing her forward. "Actually, I was hoping we could talk about that. About us." "Oh?" Sarah arched an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. "What's on your mind?" Emily could feel the rush of adrenaline coursing through her. This was her moment. She had to seize it. "I think we've both changed, and I want to be honest about how I feel. I want to reconnect, but I need to show you the real me, the one that I've been hiding for a long time." As the words left her lips, she watched as Sarah's expression transformed from curiosity to something deeper. Recognition, perhaps. She was aware that this shared journey could reveal more than the fabric of their friendship. It could challenge Emily's own perceptions of worthiness. "Emily, I felt that too," Sarah admitted, her voice quiet yet firm. "It hasn't been easy navigating this path without knowing how you truly feel." The mirroring of their emotions sparked an illuminating connection, making Emily realize how some unspoken barriers weren't merely issues between them, but reflections of her own internal struggle. "I've debated for so long about whether to let you back in, whether to show you my insecurities, my failures," she confessed, feeling both vulnerable and liberated with each sentence. "Feelings don't have to be perfect or pretty to be real," Sarah interjected, a subtle understanding hovering in the space between them. "Let's meet each other where we are." A lump formed in Emily's throat. Could she truly reveal the fears that paralyzed her daily? At that moment it dawned on her that this wasn't just about their friendship. It was about reclaiming the narrative of her life, allowing the rawness of her authenticity to emerge. As the conversation unfolded, each sentence pulled Emily deeper into her own uncharted waters, forcing her to confront the issue of her mother's opinion that had suffocated her thoughts for decades. Could this moment be the first step toward severing that tether? Suddenly an unexpected tension filled the air, the buzz of the cafe fading into the background. Emily's pulse raced as she prepared for unearthing truths she had long buried, knowing that vulnerability could either unveil friendships anew or push apart what she valued most. "You deserve to be seen, Emily," Sarah's voice sliced through her spiraling thoughts. "We both do." The words hung heavily in the space, igniting a renewed determination within Emily. But with this clarity rose an acute anxiety. What if revealing herself only succeeded in tearing them apart, even further than before? The stakes escalated, pressing against her to take the plunge into honesty or retreat back to comfortable facades. Would courage carry her through, or would fear hold her captive once again? And as she ventured further into the depths of their conversation, the scope of her own revelations began to ripple outward, threatening to expose the vulnerabilities she had worked so hard to bury. The question loomed. Could she confront not only her insecurities but also the specter of her past? In that moment of poised decision, she understood. The revealing would begin, and the truth would demand its due, whether she was ready or not. As the silence stretched on, Emily felt the weight of Sarah's gaze. Every hesitation swirled around her. This was the crux of her evolution. She opened her mouth, a tumult of thoughts surging, grappling with the desire to be honest and the fear of how much to reveal. "I'm tired, Sarah," she started softly, her voice faltering. "Tired of pretending everything is fine. I want to be real, but it scares me." A tremor laced her last words, a physical manifestation of the disquiet that had been her companion for too long. "It's okay to be scared," Sarah offered reassuringly, her eyes kind but focused. "It's brave to admit that. We've all had our struggles. I've had mine too. Why don't you start where you feel comfortable?" Emily took another deep breath, her heart drumming in her ears. "I've been feeling stuck, like I'm in this loop where I'm just going through the motions. At work, with my friends, with everything. I don't want to keep filtering my true self just to fit in." She paused, allowing the room's comforting bustle to wash over her momentarily. The cafe's energy felt like an anchor, like a reminder that life continued all around her even as her personal storm swirled within. "I'm tired of being invisible," she confessed, her voice gaining strength. "Especially when it feels like I'm being held back by my own mother's expectations. She has this vision for me and I don't know how to escape it." Sarah's brow furrowed with concern but also empathy. "Have you ever considered that maybe it's not just her expectations but your own feelings of inadequacy?" Emily felt the sting of those words, like a sharp probing light into the corners of her self-doubt. "Do you think that's true? I mean, I've always tried to please her. I thought that was what everyone expected." "Maybe everyone, including you, has expected too much of yourself," Sarah replied gently. "Sometimes we impose a narrative on ourselves without realizing it." Emily let Sarah's words sink in, ricocheting against the inner walls of her guarded heart. What if she dismantled that narrative piece by piece, confronting each memory and disappointment? But how do I just break free from all of that? I'm not sure where to begin. "Start by acknowledging that your desires matter." Sarah leaned forward, pivotal in her support. "Think about what truly makes you happy, not what others think should make you happy." With each word, Emily felt the tendrils of her past loosen just a little. The fear of disappointing her mother had loomed like a permanent cloud, but now there was a glimmer of clarity, a doorway opening to the possibilities of who she could be, unshackled from external validation. "I guess I need to redefine what success means to me, instead of just following the blueprint someone else set," she admitted, tentative yet hopeful. The idea held both promise and terror. "Exactly. It's about learning to prioritize your own feelings over theirs," Sarah encouraged, warmth radiating from her presence like sunlight breaking through dense clouds. "It's a journey, but you're already taking the first step by simply acknowledging how you feel." As their conversation deepened, Emily began to feel the ripples of her own revelations moving outward, igniting an emboldened spirit. Sarah's understanding provided a scaffold, one firm enough for Emily to start recognizing her own latent strengths. "What if I stumble?" Emily asked, her excitement mingling with lingering trepidation. "What if I chase my own path and get lost?" "Every stumble is a chance to learn," Sarah reassured her, unwavering. "True growth often requires making mistakes. Courage isn't about avoiding failure. It's about embracing it and moving forward anyway." The certainty in Sarah's voice struck a chord, resonating with a truth Emily desperately needed to hear. As she spoke freely, the anxiety began to recede, replaced by the exhilarating rush of unearthing hidden desires, each one longing to be addressed. "So what's the first thing you'll do to reclaim your narrative?" Sarah asked, a knowing smile gracing her lips as if she sensed the change bubbling within Emily. "I think I'll start by having that conversation with my mom," Emily revealed, her voice steadying with the conviction that this was indeed the path to self-rediscovery. "I can no longer be afraid to tell her how I feel." A moment of silence passed, filled with mutual understanding. It was a significant decision, and Emily felt the scales of her vulnerability tipping toward empowerment. What if it doesn't go well? She contemplated aloud, the weight of uncertainty still heavy. Then you will deal with it. You're not alone in this, Sarah reassured her. Taking a deep breath, Emily felt a flicker of determination igniting within her, a glimmer of the woman she was ready to become. With newfound resolve buoyed by Sarah's support, she would confront not just her mother, but the entrenched patterns of expectation that had held her hostage. As they continued to share, awakening hopes and fears grew ever clearer, revealing a friendship rekindling itself. Emily realized that this was only the beginning, a launch pad into uncharted territories. In that moment of clarity, she sensed a pivotal shift. She wouldn't remain a passive spectator in her life anymore. The next chapter of her narrative awaited, one where she would define who she truly was. But in the ensuing quiet, doubt lingered like a shadow. Could she really step into that role? And as they prepared to leave the cafe, the undeniable tension of her mother's impending response lingered, casting a daunting outline over the promise of transformation ahead. Would Emily's newfound voice drown out the echoes of expectation, or would it simply amplify them? The uncertainty loomed, heavy and charged. Emily stood at the cafe's entrance, her pulse rapid as she contemplated her next steps. The warmth of the afternoon sun cut through the brisk air, a comforting contrast to the cold swirl of anxiety within her. She could still hear Sarah's voice echoing in her mind, urging her to prioritize what made her happy, to reclaim her narrative. But the daunting weight of the conversation with her mother awaited. It loomed like a storm cloud threatening to overshadow the newfound clarity she felt. Emily took a deep breath, trying to summon the courage needed to effectively communicate her feelings. "This is it," she whispered to herself, the urgent cadence of her voice mingling with the murmur of passers-by who bustled by, each lost in their own worlds. She couldn't continue pretending everything was perfect. As she walked toward her apartment, she envisioned the conversation unfolding. Would she simply describe her feelings, or would she need to stand her ground? Doubts clawed at her resolve. What if her mother dismissed her emotions as mere whims? Reaching home, she hesitated before stepping inside, needing a moment to steady herself. The walls felt like they were closing in, each corner requiring her to confront not just her mother's expectations, but her own entrenched fears. She summoned her inner strength, recalling Sarah's words. Courage isn't about avoiding failure. It's about embracing it. With a sense of purpose, she dialed her mother's number. As the phone rang, her heart raced, the distance between them collapsing under the weight of silence. When her mother picked up, the familiar voice sparked both nostalgia and tension. "Emily, is everything all right?" Her mother's tone was a blend of concern and inquiry, a reminder of the thick layers of expectation that had shaped their relationship. "Actually, Mom, there's something I need to talk about," Emily replied, steeling her voice against the trembling undercurrent of uncertainty. "Is it about work? Did something happen?" Her mother's voice tightened, mirroring the apprehension that clawed at Emily's stomach. Emily hesitated. Should she soothe her mother's fears by framing her struggles in a traditional context, center them around her job or social life? No, she desperately desired honesty. "It's not about work. It's about me. I feel like I've been living according to expectations that aren't my own. I need to explore what truly matters to me." The silence on the other end thickened, a high-stakes moment in their family tapestry. Emily's breathing became more pronounced, each inhalation a sharp reminder of the stakes involved. She could almost hear her mother's thoughts processing, a blend of disbelief and concern weaving through their conversation. "What do you mean, Emily? What's wrong with the life we've built?" Her mother's response was quick, a protective instinct flaring. "Nothing is wrong with it, Mom. But I need to forge my own path," Emily pressed, her confidence solidifying with every passing word. "I feel trapped, and I want to redefine what success means for me. I'm tired of feeling invisible." A pause stretched on elongating fragments of uncertainty. Would her mother understand? Would she fight for her preconceived notions of success, clinging to an outdated script? What does that even mean? A hint of frustration laced her mother's voice. You have everything you need, why change that? There's safety in what you know. Safety can sometimes feel like a cage, Emily countered, her words now imbued with the conviction born of her recent reflections. I can't pursue my dreams if they're defined by someone else's terms. I need you to see that. The confrontation hung in the air, unyielding. For years, Emily had settled into the role of the dutiful daughter, harmonizing with her mother's vision of success. The boldness of her words felt both exhilarating and profoundly terrifying. She could hear the strained breaths of her mother on the other end, the weight of their history coiling like a serpent around them. The urgency to maintain familial bonds tugged at Emily, but the cost of silence was rapidly becoming too high. So, what are you saying? Her mother finally asked, a mix of frustration and concern radiating from her voice. You want to just abandon everything we've worked for? I want to find my own way, Mom. I can't promise it'll mirror your life or expectations, but I need to try. This is my journey. As she spoke, a surge of power coursed through Emily, each word stripping away preconceived notions, exposing the raw essence of who she wanted to become. A silence settled again in the conversation, echoing her mother's struggle to either adapt or resist. Just as tension reached a breaking point, a familiar thought crept in. What if she had the resilience to face whatever came next? Her heart raced, yet determination swelled within her. She wouldn't back down. Emily, her mother began slowly, her tone tipping toward something softer yet firm. What if I told you I'm ready to embrace whatever happens next? Emily interjected, her voice commanding a newfound bravado. I want to choose for myself. The line crackled with potential. The threshold of transformation lay just beyond her mother's next words. Would they bond over a shared understanding, or would they clash yet again, with Emily's evolving identity as the source of contention? Emily's pulse quickened as she awaited her mother's response, an image of their past meetings flashing vividly before her, filled with hope and disappointment. The uncertainty suffocated the air between them, both an invitation and a challenge. This was a profound turning point in her life. Could her newly claimed voice resonate within their relationship? Would it foster a deeper understanding, or would it simply ignite the same conflict anew? As the clock ticked on, Emily held her breath, teetering on the edge of a pivotal moment. The path ahead glimmered ominously, yet the charge of possibility crackled in the air, enticing Emily to take the leap into the unknown. Would she emerge renewed, or would the shadows of doubt overshadow her light? Emily's heart raced as the silence stretched between her and her mother over the phone. Every second felt like an eternity, teetering on a precipice of vulnerability that threatened to tip either way, the hope for connection or the dread of despair. Mom, she said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. I understand your desire to protect me, but I also need to know that my dreams matter. I can't ignore them any longer. On the other end, her mother's heavy breathing seemed to echo the thought swirling in Emily's mind. The tension between them was palpable, a tumult of love and disappointment. Layers of expectation, hopes and fears clashed like titans. What do you want me to say? Her mother finally said, a mixture of exasperation and resignation riddling her tone. Emily sensed the shift. I don't expect you to agree right away. I just need you to see me for who I am and respect my choices. I have to write. I have to pursue that part of myself. Days of doubt had prepared her for this moment, and the weight of every hesitation slowly began to lift. Sharing her truth, though daunting, revealed a newly awakened sense of self. You've always had such a passion for writing, and I dismissed it when I thought what you needed was security, her mother said, her voice wavering, a hint of realization creeping in. I didn't think it was practical. Emily's heart soared, hope flickering against the backdrop of uncertainty. It can be practical, Mom. It can be meaningful. If I don't at least try, I'll always wonder what could have been. I want to embrace my story, flaws and all. You're talking about exposing yourself to the world, her mother replied softly. the steel in her voice yielding to the warmth of understanding. But what if they don't like what they see? What if they do? Emily countered, the intensity of her resolve shining through. What if sharing my truths helps someone else feel less alone? What if it brings me peace? She could almost feel the shift in her mother's thoughts, the walls of expectation softening into possibilities. After a long pause, her mother spoke again, the vulnerability creeping into her voice. I just want you to be safe. Emily wanted to laugh, a surge of warmth coursing through her. I know, and I appreciate that. But safety can't diminish my reality. I need to write my own script, no matter how chaotic it may be. A trembling breath on the other end told Emily she was getting through. I don't know if I understand yet, but if you're passionate about this, then I'll support you, her mother admitted, her tone tinged with tentative hope. Maybe we can figure this out together. Emily felt tears pricking her eyes, emotion sweeping through her. Thank you, she whispered, disbelief mingling with joy. Was this truly happening? Was she really stepping into her own light? Just promise me you'll be careful, her mother added softly, and for the first time Emily felt tolerance mingling with embrace. I promise. I'll be honest, and I'll navigate this carefully, but I won't go back to pretending. As the conversation wound down, a sense of liberation washed over Emily. The storm that had threatened her finally receding. The enormity of her choice didn't feel so unbearably heavy anymore. It was an exhale, a release into a possibility she had long craved. Hanging up, she stood there for a moment, letting the gravity of what she had achieved sink in. She had not only asserted her truth, but had also begun crafting a bond of understanding with her mother, one built on layers of vulnerability and support. Freed from the confines of her past, she could finally embrace a narrative that was hers alone. She was ready to dive deep into her writing, to explore the complexities of her existence, utterly authentic, messy, and unabashedly real. As she sat down at her desk once more, the blank pages before her called like a siren. This wasn't merely a blank slate. It was an invitation to transform struggle into story, challenge into triumph. She picked up her pen, her heart racing with exhilaration and purpose. Fear is not the enemy, she scribbled, her fingers dancing over the blank page. It's the catalyst that propels me forward, each word a brushstroke creating the portrait of my truth. With every stroke of the pen, clarity blossomed over her. No longer a spectator of her dreams, but a courageous creator of her own unfolding story. As evening settled in, the weight of uncertainty had morphed into vibrant possibility. She had found her voice, embraced her narrative in both the darkest and the brightest corners of her heart. With a deep breath, Emily beamed at her notebook, a sense of solid confidence blooming within her. She had conquered the shadows that once haunted her, stepping firmly into the light of possibility. The journey was just beginning, and she felt invigorated, ready to meet every word with courage. Time to write, she murmured softly to herself, smiling at the thought of the lives she might touch with her story, echoing the silent pulse of empowerment she now knew resided in her. In this moment of establishment, a new Emily emerged, one who had confronted her fears and declared her own truth. The bittersweet symphony of existence lay before her, and she was ready to compose her greatest work yet. Emily had finally stepped into her own narrative, molded not by the fears that had once constrained her, but by the truth she chose to embrace. She would write her story, no longer hidden, but shining bright. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.